Gina also said at the beginning of this call, I think before we were on air, that she loved the way you talk. You've got such a lovely, lovely, calming voice, and
it's like a sex therapist voice.
Saucy.
I hope you mean therapist, not phone operator.
Yes, I said therapist.
Okay.
Where is this going, man? Where is this going?
Hey, Warners, welcome to another episode of The Women Your Mother Warned You About, brought to you by Sales Gravy. I'm Gina Tremarco, Master Sales Trainer and Coach at Sales Gravy, and currently in the audition phase here at the podcast is Susanna Gray Jones, my co-host. Susanna, any opening words for today?
Absolutely. I'm very happy to be here. Sales Gravy, women your mother warned you about, making sales saucy again.
Oh, that's Susanna's new thing. She, you heard it here, making sales saucy again. Our producer also is referring to us as sassy and classy, but he has not told us which one is which. Hey, that should be a poll in itself. Who do you think is the sassy one? Who do you think is the classy one? Who knows? But you know what? Let's ask our guest, Jordana Zeldin, who is joining us here today. Hey, Jordana, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I hope you didn't just say that you were going to ask me to say who is the sassy one and who is the classy one.
Kind of like, what do you, I mean, you just got here. If you had to like pick one.
I just arrived. No.
Okay, you know what? We'll forget that question, Jordana. Let's ask this question, because this show is The Women Your Mother Warned You About. We're all women here. And by the way, I love, I saw somewhere in an email that you sent to our producer about wanting to know if you should wear lipstick today. I love that because I'm all about the lipstick. So I just want you to know I love that.
It's funny. My hair, no one can see us, but my hair is usually in some state of disarray. And I found what really brings the whole look together is lipstick.
Yes.
So I've started to, I'm only like new to the lipstick train.
Oh, you're kidding. Why is that?
Yeah. I don't know. I've never been someone who felt all that comfortable being made up, but a friend of mine who's like, you're doing a lot of video. You just need a red lip. I'm like, oh, okay.
It looks so good on you. And
yeah,
actually, I completely empathize with that. I got given some lipstick for Christmas, and I'm kind of at that age now. I think need to try a bit harder, So I love that on you. I love that.
Wait a second, Susanna. You're at the age of.
Don't say that.
You're at the age. I say that because she's been messaging me, wanting me to tell her how old I think she is, and I guessed too old.
Awkward.
We'll talk about that later because you are way off with my age, but that's another story. So the question I want to ask you first, Jordana, is how would you define a woman your mother warned you about?
So can I just share that? So my mom, she is a sex therapist and psychotherapist who used to appear on the Sally Jesse Raphael show.
No.
I kid you not.
I love this.
I mean, so I'll say that I am certainly not the woman that my mother warned me about, in that she wanted me to be a big badass force in the world.
Wait, what is your mom's name? I watched Sally Jesse Raphael for a while.
It was back in the, it was a few episodes. And actually she and I remember one year, I think it was in middle school or something, like we went to New York City, was it New York City or Chicago? I don't even remember where it was filmed, but we went together to the city and stayed at a hotel, and she got picked up in a limo. And so she's always really been someone who puts herself out there and takes big risks and wants to be seen by the world. And she's kind of encouraged me to do the same.
Saucy.
It is saucy. I love it. So you would definitely probably consider yourself a woman other mothers warned you about, but not your mother.
I mean, it's tough to say. It's like I grew up in a community of people who were encouraging women to do good and important things that felt true to them. So I'm sure that I'm the woman that somebody's mother warned me about, but it wasn't mine or anyone that I knew.
I love it. Well, give our listeners just a little bit of background of who you are. I'm taking a new approach, by the way, Susanna. Instead of like us reading the bio at the beginning of the show, I would rather you just kind of give us your take of who you are, to give us our guests a look at who you are.
It's a great question. And it's always evolving, this description of who I am. But
cool.
Right now, I am a sales coach and trainer and speaker and advisor for growth stage sales teams. But I'm someone who never, ever in a million years imagined that I would be in sales. I was an actor early on in my career. And I know that, Gina, you have an improv background. And
3 of us, theatrical salespeople.
Yes, right? But what was interesting is that I realized pretty early on, I wasn't such a great actor, but got really, really excited about directing.
Yes.
And I started directing actors and working with them to pull out these really grounded and authentic performances. And, as I look back throughout the course of my career, first in the art world and then later in the fine art world, where I was running an arts organization that mentored and developed emerging visual artists, my kind of segue into sales was at an art technology startup that needed to hire a sales team of people who could speak the language of the art world. But a through line all the way through has been my interest in kind of mentoring and empowering and developing other human beings. And once I figured out what the hell I was doing as a salesperson, which took time, and it was thanks to great leadership and mentorship, I got really excited about helping to do for others what this mentor and sales leader did for me. And I found myself getting even more excited about like their victories that I helped to support than I did my own, sales wins. And I thought, I think I really want to do this like sales coaching and training thing. But to me, it feels like a variation of my theater directing from my early 20s in a way.
So I find this fascinating, the fact that and I've listened to your podcast, by the way, your other podcast. This is the best one you'll ever do, obviously. But I find it fascinating that you didn't define yourself as a salesperson at all. And you say you had this sales manager who changed your perception. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah. I mean, look, sales, there's all this yucky baggage associated with what a salesperson is, right? They're deceptive and manipulative and pushy, and they lie and make you feel uncomfortable. And early on, I just thought that that's what I would have to do in order to be a salesperson. And I really loved the company that I worked for, and the pay was great, and they had incredible perks, and it was this buzzy startup. I wanted to be a part of it. But I remember even like for the first, year, I don't even think I told my friends what I did there because of that inner conflict, And I did fine, but not great. My enthusiasm and my knowledge for art and my comfort talking that language kind of carried me, but I didn't really have any selling skills to speak of. And it wasn't until the sales leader joined the team. And the first thing he helped all of us to realize was that this idea that we had of what a salesperson was and should be is garbage. And we, the people that we are, the individuals that we are exactly who we should be selling as, right? We should be bringing ourselves to the sales conversation. And that really shifted how I thought about what I was doing, how I felt in my work, and the results I was able to achieve. I became, like the top performer on the team for years running, primarily, I think, because I was able to connect so deeply with myself in the process, which opened up, the opportunity for prospects to connect with me, as fellow human beings. And when you're in yourself and your work, it's like a superpower,
I relate so much to that. The whole theatrical thing, which we all have that background. Like early.
You too, Susanna?
Yeah. I'm an opera singer.
So all 3 of us have that. I also have a directing and producing background.
Okay.
Right. And I'm just joining the stage again after 2 years off. I'm co-directing a show and starring in it. Not sure how I'm going to make all that work yet, but we'll see. I actually forced myself into it so I would have a personal life outside of work. So let's see how that goes. But I was I've been in the entertainment world. I was in that for so long in my career, and forever avoided the whole sales thing. Same reasoning, right? Because we all kind of saw it as this, I don't do that icky kind of stuff. I mean, I was in marketing and PR for a really long time, but people kept coming up to me saying, oh, you should come work for us. We want you to sell for us. Like this, it constantly happened. It was this constant pattern. I'm like, why do people keep saying that to me? Like, I'm not a salesperson. They're like, but you are. And finally it took someone to point out to me that my approachability and my ability to have a conversation and to make people feel good was what it was all about. And that's what I think the people who had tried recruiting me in the past, that's what they were looking for, that spark. And isn't that what all sales leaders are looking for, are salespeople who can actually build rapport, have connection, make relationships. And for some reason, those of us in the theater arts, like, we have it. Would everybody agree here?
Absolutely. Jordana, one thing that I think is really interesting about what you said, you mentioned about this shift in belief about becoming a salesperson. Knowing that sales manager came in and made you feel like, no, I can be a salesperson. What advice, and this is a difficult question for a podcast, but what advice would you give to sales managers who have salespeople on their team who aren't identifying with their human self?
So it's such a good question, and something I think about a lot, because I'm working with sales leaders and enablement folks, to help them to create not just to teach their teams the important skills, but to help them create these environments, right, where they, as the human beings that they are, can really show up. And I think that, oftentimes sales leaders and enablement folks, they think like, well, what do we need to teach our team this year, right? But teaching is just really scratching the surface. It's like learning requires something else. And learning primarily involves stumbling and testing and experimenting and failing. And you've got to feel really safe in your environment to feel comfortable enough to learn. And part of what this sales leader did is he created a culture of learning and feedback and laughter and listening to one another, right? Where we were able to, so prior to when he arrived, we all pitched in phone booths, like in these little startup-y phone booths. Like, we never even heard each other selling. One of the first things he did was like, out of the phone booth into the sales pit. I want you all hearing each other. I want you all screwing up in front of each other. I want you all winning in front of each other. And when we were able to hear how imperfect we all were, hear his feedback, solicit feedback, offer feedback to each other, that opened something up in us. It became a place that was safe enough to fail and safe enough to bring our entire selves, to the work that we were doing. So that's a big part of what I help sales teams to do as well. Create these cultures, these containers where people can show up in their full humanity.
That is such a great point that I haven't even thought about, is creating that safe space, which is a phrase we used all the time at our improv theater, of this is a safe space to learn. And this is a safe space to create for our students, but also for our performers. It was always about a safe space where after every single show, we would have a debrief session that was basically a coaching session that was, know this from the theater, of like, and we always led it with, how do you think you did tonight? And it was never, ever this abrasive or beat you up kind of thing. It was like, how do you think you did tonight? And you let them talk about it. And then as a director, right? Like, we all know this as directors, I'm like, yeah, you're totally spot on. And here's some other areas that, I thought you could do better, or I thought, wow, I'm like, or I might point out things that they didn't notice about themselves that were amazing. I'm like, you totally missed like how great you were at sustaining an accent that entire time when you were put on the spot to do that. Right. And so being able to give that, and then you're doing it in front of the whole ensemble.
That's right. That peer, like the presence of your peers when receiving feedback, and creating a culture where you are empowered to give your peers feedback is one of the most powerful things that you can do to create a really thriving culture. But that also connects back to hiring too. Because like, you've got to make sure that you get the right people on the bus who are game to go there and game to be vulnerable and game to screw up en route to mastering the sales thing, right? And there are ways to do that in hiring as well.
Yes, Susanna, you have any thoughts on that as a recruiter?
I do, because I'm thinking back to junior management days when you had some people who you really believed in, but the whole pressure of being in a target-driven environment put them off. And, but the task as a manager, you often find middle managers actually, where they've got someone above them saying your team need to do this. And they translate that to their team as a hammer above their head. And you lose great salespeople, really good salespeople. And I wonder how many salespeople out there are in different jobs because they thought that they weren't a salesperson. And I think changing this perception and this stigma about, maybe Jordana, if she hadn't have had that manager, would never have had this awesome career in sales. It's you just don't know.
Well, also, like, one of the really, I think, broken things about how our field operates is that, like, we are one of the only performance-based skills where the expectation is that something is explained to us, and then, like, we're just expected to do it, right? When the stakes are high, when revenue is on the line, like, imagine learning to play the violin and they're like, all right, we're going to tell you about it. And then your first concert is next week. It's crazy, right? And the missing piece from what I can see, having been on, a variety of teams that had varying degrees of what I'm about to talk about, is practice, creating a culture of practice where when you learn something in your head, you're reading a book or you go to a training or you're listening to a podcast, you're able to get some at bats, right? Try the thing you've learned on for size before the pressure's on, right? And there's something really powerful too, culturally, not only from a skills development perspective, when you are practicing, i.e. stumbling and failing and doubling back and making corrections, that is really great for skill building and creates the kind of like shared vulnerability that also happens to be great for culture building as well. It's cool. I could geek out about this stuff all day.
Well, let's keep geeking. I think we're like the kids in the band. We're the thespians.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
The thespians.
I noticed because I've been doing my research on you. That sounds really creepy, doesn't it? I've been doing my research on you as a recruiter.
In 2022, I just take for granted that everyone knows everything.
But I think what's really interesting is you started your new business in the height of the pandemic. That takes guts. And tell us a bit more about that. Tell us a bit more about your business and what inspired you to start it.
So prior to starting Spring Training, I was a sales coach at an amazing coaching and training company called Sales Gym. And we were hit really hard by COVID, and they had to kind of contract and lay off all of their coaching staff. And really the question for me was, did I want to go in-house and join an enablement team, or did I feel ready to, see how my sea legs worked, right? And try the stuff on for size. And what had happened prior to my layoff was that I had poked my head out on LinkedIn, and I found a couple of things. I found this incredible community of people who were speaking my language. And where I had previously thought that I was like this, like the lone wolf thinking these thoughts about selling, about how we need to make it more human and blah, blah. Like I found an active conversation already happening on LinkedIn, and I felt like I could be a voice that chimed in. And it was that community and the validation that people were really interested in thinking about selling in this way that made me think, screw it. Like I've got my unemployment. I've got my $600 kicker from the government. It's the best safety net I'll ever have. Let's give it a shot. And here we are. What is it? A year and a few months later. Yeah.
Love it. Gina also said at the beginning of this call, I think before we were on air, that she loved the way you talk. You've got such a lovely calming voice. And
it's like a sex therapist voice.
Saucy.
I hope you mean therapist, not phone operator.
Yes, I said therapist.
Okay.
Where is this going, man? Where is this going? You never know where it's going with Gina. You never know where it's going to go next. But
you should talk.
Why?
And here's some words from our sponsor, Jeb Blunt at Sales Gravy.
Hi, this is Jeb Blunt. There's a reason why thousands of sales professionals and top companies across the globe hone their sales skills at Sales Gravy University. You see, Sales Gravy University is different than most learning platforms. First, we have live courses taught in a virtual classroom by our master trainers that start almost every single day. And our e-learning platform is populated with hundreds of hours of sales training content produced by some of the top sales trainers in the world, including Gina's spontaneous selling course, which is worth checking out. Now, I've got some good news. If you've never taken a course on Sales Gravy University, if you're a new user, you can take your very first course for free. That's any course on the platform, absolutely free. Just go to learn.salesgravy.com. That's learn.salesgravy.com, or click the e-learning tab in the top menu at salesgravy.com. Pick out your course, and when you check out, use coupon code FREECOURSE to get that course for free. That is free course to get your very first course for free.
You're into TM as well, and I don't know much about TM. How does that relate to sales? Does it relate to sales?
Wait, now that is scary. How do you know that?
I'm a good stalker. I'm a recruiter.
Where?
I actually listened to one of your other podcasts,
and what is TM?
Okay, so TM, God, the reason I'm so surprised and impressed you're bringing this up is because I literally, not 1 week ago, like really re-upped my commitment to meditating twice a day for 20 minutes. And I actually log into this kind of facilitated meditation session through the TM Foundation. And I haven't missed a meditation since literally just last week. But it's basically an opportunity to kind of go inward with a mantra that you are given by a teacher, that you tell no one, that you repeat to yourself kind of softly and as vaguely as you might think a thought. And it allows for this really inward, quiet experience.
What does TM stand for?
It stands for transcendental meditation.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay.
And they talk about this idea of, kind of, as you're meditating, that you're kind of like transcending into this deeper place within yourself. But it's when I do it twice a day for 20 minutes, it is powerful. I mean, I feel so much more focused and even, and I'm able to let things just like roll off my back in a way that when I'm not doing it, I feel a little tighter. I can't, whether or not it's TM or any other kind of meditation, I just can't recommend enough giving yourself at least, 20 minutes. That's like how long most of us will scroll on, I don't know, Facebook or Pinterest every night, like giving yourself that time to just, go inward. It's powerful.
It's a good reminder. I had created a practice of that when the pandemic started and I got away from it. I feel like I need to revisit it.
Yeah. I think, and this may or may not relate to selling. Maybe we can find a way to bring it back if we need to, but
I think it does. But go on.
Well, they're just like, we're so frequently looking for like external stimulation, especially on social media, like notifications and emails. And it's like, and it's often at the expense, I think, of like intuitively tuning into ourselves and our own instincts and thoughts. So blah, blah, blah.
Well, I think that's where the meditation is helpful, is to get us centered so that, that we can build on it. So the one habit that I've maintained is a daily morning ritual of journaling what I'm grateful for, so that I stay in a grateful mindset. Like I had a horrible day yesterday, which I've not told you about yet, Susanna. It was just horrible, and I found myself at the end of the day so frustrated and realized that I hadn't logged gratitude, and then I went back to doing it. Like I didn't get to it yesterday and I did it this morning. And I'm like, I should have done this yesterday because it would have centered me, right? Because if we see the things that are positive, and I don't just do the gratitudes, I also do props, basically like what things did I do well yesterday? Right. So I reflect back on what did I excel in? And sometimes it's just, I had a good hair day, which good hair day made it on the list yesterday.
It's not easy to have all the time.
Huh?
It's not easy to have all the time.
No, it's not. And when you're like, your hair is rocking, you're like damn, my hair looks good today. Right. So I had to celebrate that. And when I did that this morning, I'm like, okay, it wasn't that bad yesterday. I mean, it was bad, but it wasn't that bad. And so when I start the day with those things, I find that my day is easier.
It's interesting. I've often noticed that along those lines, like if I start the day on my phone in like a reactive mode, it becomes very hard to recenter. Like you're just like responding to the external stimuli of the outside world. But if you spend it with yourself, like you're doing first thing, Gina.
Well, I'm trying not to start my day with answering emails anymore.
Yeah, that's great.
Because I find I am in that reactive mode immediately. So I'm just not doing it. And I'm trying to find something to focus on personally.
Yeah, I will say too, as it relates to sales, I mean, sales can feel so volatile, right? So to give yourself the opportunity to take a beat and ground, be it in journaling or reading or meditating in the morning, so that you're not riding the crazy roller coaster that is wins and rejection.
Yes.
That can only be beneficial.
Yeah, it's so relevant because we talk about mindset, and I think about the amount of people that I've been coaching in sales who burst into tears because of the pressure and the anxiety that can be attached to their employment wherever they are. Something like TM could be a really good fix for something like that. Do you think?
Well, I mean, I'm not a doctor, but there have been all sorts of studies connecting, transcendental meditation to better outcomes with PTSD, depression, anxiety, ADHD, and on and on. So it's pretty cool.
And I think it would also, I haven't done the research on this, but I'm guessing that this would also be helpful for fostering creativity, which I'm huge about when it comes to the link between creativity, critical thinking, and problem solving, which, let's bring it back to sales, right? Because our job is to find solutions. So I think there's a definite, that's what I'm going to say that I'm going to stick to it.
And TM was and continues to be for Paul McCartney, the meditation practice of choice for the Beatles. And look what they made.
All right.
Absolutely.
So bottom line here, Warners, you want to make more money? Meditate.
I think that's sage advice. I really do. Yeah.
I love that. I've got another question for you, Jordana.
I am so surprised.
I am so interested in what you're saying about getting teams together, because it's been very much part of my last decade, and you seem to have lots of really great ideas. And I'm keen to understand the whole working from home thing that happened during the pandemic. You speak a lot about getting teams together, speaking about it. How have you tackled that obstacle of the working from home model in getting people together and doing the role play?
That is such an important question, because of course, like one of the things in some ways that sales leaders and enablement folks have been struggling with amidst the pandemic is like how to continue to maintain the fabric of a team culture, right? And for me, early on in my sales career, as I said, like pitching in front of my colleagues, next to them, hearing them, and they're hearing me, because I mean, it was one of the most invaluable things. But what's interesting is that when I worked at Sales Gym, the coaching and training consultancy, they were entirely remote. Yet the work that we did with our clients was entirely remote. But what was so interesting about that team culture is that it rivaled the very best of what I had in my first sales job. And we were all together, in the same room. And I got very curious, culture geek that I am, about why that was. And I came back to this idea of practice. Now, part of Sales Gym's methodology was practice-based. Like we coached not through explaining, but through one-on-one and group sessions where we were all very specifically and in a calibrated way practicing specific sales skills. But practice was also baked in to our company culture right from the hiring process. And this is what I work with sales teams a little bit on too, is like making sure that you're getting people in the door who are down to practice, i.e. fail, stumble, be vulnerable. So do you want me to get specific about this hiring process? Because it was so frigging cool.
Please.
Okay. So step one, right? Standard, send off your resume and cover letter, right? But if they liked that, you were then instructed to call up a random number and leave a voicemail message about why you thought you were the best person for the job. Now, that alone is kind of like outside the box and screened away a number of people who just didn't have the guts to do that, right? Let's say you did that and they liked the message you left. From there, it was your job to learn a skill that the company taught, and they taught this to you by video, and show up to a mock coaching session with a member of their team. This is never having spoken to anyone, and coach to that skill that the company teaches their clients. Now, the test was not how perfect of a coach you are, right? How beautifully did you manage to get, the person who was being coached from like not so competent to really competent? That was important. That's part of it. But they were really testing for how game we were to get really far out of our comfort zone, to try a new thing on for size, and to give it our all, right? To prep for it and show up and do our best. And it was then and only then, after leaving the random message and having to coach this thing that we only had recently learned, that they set up a series of interviews with us. But that process gets a very specific kind of person who is down to experiment and learn and grow and fail and be awkward and show up in spite of it all on the bus. And it starts with hiring. It really does.
I love this. That stunned silence. I think that's really, I love it. I mean, Gina and I, when we coach people, we often talk about your different learning styles. So in learning styles, you often say adaptability is the way that some people learn. Do you think, based on what you're saying about role plays and people learning by doing things and practicing, do you think that means that salespeople, the best salespeople, have adaptability, that they have that as a learning skill?
I don't know specifically about all of the varied learning types, but I will say that adaptability and flexibility is a really important part of selling. I mean, there's a lot of unpredictability, in the process of selling. And the best sellers are not the ones who just follow the rote script. They're not.
You mean they improvise?
Gina, yeah, they yes and.
Yeah, I that really is it. It is the improv piece that you can get off the script, and adaptability is kind of synonymous with agility. And if we kind of circle back over to the word practice and the word play. Right. Like salespeople hate to hear role play. I mean, I just did a role play session with a client this morning and his team. And the youngest one, he's actually a technician who's moved into some selling. And he was so nervous. And I'm like, all right, stand up. And this is all virtual. I'm like, stand up. And he's like, well, I go, just stand up. I'm like, shake your hands in the air. Just shake your body right now.
Body.
Like, just move your body. I'm like, I'm going to give you a little pep talk here. This is highly intimidating, I know, because you got these 3 older guys behind you who think they know it all. And now you're doing this. And I'm going to tell you, my boss put me on the spot last week. Oh, I don't tell you about this, Susanna. I'm like, and it threw me off my game. And then I had to do it again with him. And I had to just switch my mindset and be like, you know what? I'm going to screw something up and it's okay. Like, it's okay. You're here to try it out in a safe space.
Learn.
You're here to try it in a safe space. So when we look at things like the word practice and play, role play, right? Like at our, in a show, you have to go to a rehearsal, right? In improv, we would have improv practice. That's what it was called. Improv practice. Everybody was required to attend. And the running joke was the people outside of our world, they're like, how do you practice improv? Ha, ha, ha. We just do. We practice taking random suggestions from an audience and running with them.
Right.
That's what we do. It's practice. That's why we're so good. And why someone walks into an improv show and they're like, how do they do that? I could never do it. Well, we practice it.
Well, that's the thing. And coming back to this poor person who was like, shaking with nervousness, part of that, again, it comes back to the kind of culture that a leader has cultivated. And back to your question, Susanna, about like, well, how did this virtual team, or how can virtual teams cultivate that kind of space, not being in the same room? I remember that once I started up at Sales Gym and they were training me up as a coach, the primary vehicle, by the way, for training me was practice and role play with my managers and fellow more seasoned coaches. But what was so interesting is that twice a week, we would all meet as a team to do these what we called lightning rounds, like lightning rounds of skills that we taught our clients, right? And I remember showing up for the very first one, you two, and being so nervous because I had just learned these skills. And I thought, like, the founder of the company was there. I was like, I better be so good. I cannot mess up, right? That was kind of my attitude. But what was so interesting is that the founder of the company, he participated. And I really encourage sales leaders to participate in training, not just watch and, stand there as a God from above. And he screwed up and he asked for feedback. And it was so powerful because he, through doing that, and it was not intentional, but the impact was really profound on me. It signaled to everybody that it was okay, right? To be imperfect. Yeah. And that changed the entire dynamic of the space. And then that turned our lightning rounds not into a place to show how perfect we are, right? But into a kind of laboratory of experimentation.
Yes, I love that word, laboratory. You're making me reflect now. When I was a sales manager previously, I used to do something called a sales chamber. It sounds very saucy, doesn't it? Sales chamber. Chamber might not be the right word. Now I think about it, chamber might imply something different, but it was a sales chamber. And I, as one of the managers, would sit next to one of the consultants, and I would make a sales call. They would make a sales call, and they were surprised. And one of the things that they said made them feel most confident was seeing that people are rude to me. People tell me no, and I was the manager. So that kind of dovetails what you were saying there, really. And it's so true. And I wonder how many sales managers out there are afraid of their team seeing them fail and that they don't want to. And therefore, their team think that they have to be perfect.
This is the thing. And I have no scientific backing to back up this number, but I'd say like at least 70% of leaders think that great leadership is hiding your flaws. Right? Like not showing your imperfections. And that's wrong. I mean, it's interesting. Richard Harris, he posted a really interesting question on LinkedIn a number of weeks ago around like, should sales leaders make cold calls? And it was like a raucous debate, and on the no side, there were people who said, no, like that's such a low value use of a sales leader's time. And then others were like, yes, if a sales leader doesn't have the ability to close, a cold call, like what are they doing being a leader? But I saw it totally differently. It's not about the skill and it's not about the value of the activity. In fact, it's one of the highest value activities that a sales leader can do for the sake of culture, even if they suck at cold calling. Like you can be a shitty cold caller and an incredible leader, and that's okay. But let your team see you sucking, solicit their feedback, and get them to help you. And wow,
and not only being a good leader, right, and stepping up to do that and showing that, but it's a good reminder because you got so far away from it that you have forgotten the pain of it. And when you're thrown back in it, you're like, oh yeah, this does suck. And it increases and improves your empathy and your emotional intelligence to revisit it.
Couldn't agree more. Yeah, that's right.
So if we go back to the word play, because I love play and I've done a lot of research on the word play, and the connections again back to creativity. What if we call role playing playtime?
Well, I think, what's so interesting about role playing is that we often think that we have to like play the seller and play the prospect in order for it to be effective.
Right.
But it doesn't always have to be that way. Like something like discovery, it can be really hard to realistically role play. But the skill of cultivating curiosity.
Correct. Right.
and understanding that at the very least, in order to have something resembling a complete view of a prospect's circumstances, you need to have a really good sense of where they are and where they want to be and the implications of that. That's something that you can actually practice. And this is something that we do in the sales training community that I co-founded called the Practice Lab. You can actually practice that in a role play where you are playing yourself, talking to a partner about a change they want to make in their life.
Exactly. That's why I'm saying, like, what if we got away from the phraseology role play? Because role play elicits this visceral response to like, oh shit, I got to do this, versus the phrase playtime. We're going to have playtime. I don't know. Maybe I'll create something around this. We're going to have playtime. And to your point, right? I think why I'm so good at discovery, which I didn't think I was, but I hear that I am. I think I got so good at it because of the curiosity factor, which goes back to, you had that sales manager. I had that improv teacher back in my 20s who one day said to me, "You are so childlike in how you play on stage. Never lose that." And I held on to that my entire career. Of that is my thing, of being childlike and curious, so that when I'm in a discovery, every question I ask is based on the last answer they gave me, right? Which is a very big yes and, right?
You're in the moment.
I'm in the moment. If this, then what? And so you can practice that, right? We don't have to get into like the discovery of someone's, a specific prospect's situation, but we can do this discovery of, I think why I enjoy podcasting is, yeah, I do a little bit of research. I love having Susanna though. She does this thorough research, which is great. And then I can use that, but I can ask you questions based on the last answer you gave me that then makes it feel like this whole thing is just a flow.
That's how sales conversations should feel. Right?
That's
no one
how
wants to
they
feel like
should feel.
Yeah.
That's how they should feel. But people are following their scripts, right? And they're like, okay, let me ask the next question.
Yes.
And the prospect feels the transaction.
Yes, it's horrible.
I mean, you need to ask certain questions, but you have to be good with the timing of where it fits, and instead be in a flow that becomes so free-flowing that now the prospect just feels so comfortable that when you do go in with that important question that you got to get answered, they're just chill.
Well, it's interesting, this sense of like, there's the question of like, what questions do we need to ask? What information do we need to take, right? Discovery is often seen as like this tooth extraction, like it's a big take,
right.
As opposed to like how deeply would it be helpful to understand where this person is at and where they want to go? Like, I some of it has to do for me with the intention, or even like, what would it be like to set the intention of giving my prospect the rare experience of feeling deeply heard, seen, and understood, irrespective of whether or not they buy. Holy shit, right? It's a real shift.
Amen.
Right?
Can I get a witness in here?
Yes. Woo!
Record this and listen to it 100 times. It's so true. It's so true.
I sometimes say to sellers, I'm like, we might have your checklist, but before we do anything, set the intention of giving your prospect that experience as another human being, and your soul will feel good and theirs will feel good. And they're going to be more likely to buy from you if they feel seen by you.
Well, I think this is a kind of a great way to wrap up this episode, because, I'm just looking at some of the other stuff that I got from your website, empowering them to feel more human, to be more human in their selling, the place for sellers who want to develop human-centric sales skills, right? If you look at my LinkedIn profile, I talk about humanizing, right? I'm all about the human. How do we humanize this? And so this is what it comes down to, I think, is this: how do we make this a more human experience and not a transaction? That's right.
I mean, because regardless of what kind of seller you are, if you're challenger or relationship based, like, you are in a relationship with another human being, right? You've got to acknowledge that and attend to that relationship, just as you would any relationship out there in the world. And the same needs apply. People want to feel seen, heard, understood. They want to feel autonomous. As sellers, it's our job to give them all of that.
They want to feel loved. They don't want to feel stupid.
That's right.
I just did this in a role
So
play.
true.
I did this in a role play this morning with an HVAC company. And it was fascinating, right? It was interesting the way we did it, but one of them in his portion of it, he had the discovery portion, and he started he asked me very few questions and then went into this whole explanation about the HVAC system I allegedly was replacing. And as he was going on, I was glazing over, and I stayed in character, and I said, what is an R22? I'm like, it sounds like R2D2 to me. I'm like, this is like, are we talking Star Wars? And I was messing with him a little bit, but there was no humanization in the conversation that I was shutting down because I felt so processed in it. And I said, dude, just have a conversation about who they are as a person. Don't even talk business right away.
And this person probably doesn't realize how much better it would feel for him in his work to do what you're inspiring him to do.
Yeah. I think he got the point when I said R2D2. Like, is this a Star Wars episode?
We almost want to strip everything that people think about the whole process and the script and everything and just let them be, don't we?
I mean, it's tricky. You can say like, just be yourself. And that doesn't necessarily, I've found, at least in my experience, get the job done. I think it can be important to have like frameworks and guideposts so people have a sense of direction. And once they know where they're going, they can more confidently lead the prospect on the buying journey. Yeah. So I'm not one of these people that's like, just be yourself and you'll be great. Like, there needs to be some structural support, but sellers need to understand that like the real intentionality behind why we're doing what we're doing usually maps to something that is like very fundamentally human. And I think the more, when I connect the dots for sellers that I'm training, it's like these aha moments for them, but it's also intuitive. Somehow it's just been like papered over with scripting and years of bad sales advice.
Yes.
I'm on board with you on this. I think we do need the frameworks, 100%. I love that about what we do at Sales Gravy. Obviously, you do that too. Any good sales training company and coaching company does that. I think what a lot of companies do miss is the play portion, right? So you have a playbook, but don't forget the play part of the playbook, right? So you have to have the frameworks, but you also have to give them the room to go off the script, give them permission to go off the script. Tell them it's okay to go outside of the normal parameters that they usually do, and that's all right. And that, again, becomes a leadership issue.
It's okay to color outside the lines, right?
Yeah.
And that comes back to play as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
Exactly. So
play in the lavatory. I love it.
Yeah. So as we wrap up this show, if you want to share with our listeners a little more about your company, how they can reach out to you, how you can help them, just give our listeners some more information about you and the company.
Sure. So I recently co-founded a sales training community called the Practice Lab that launched in Q1. That is a place for sellers to learn really fundamental, impactful core sales behaviors in advance of our practice time, and then show up into lab and deeply and deliberately practice them. That's at thepracticelab.co. The first cohort is underway, but we'll be opening up applications for Q2 soon. And then I'd say don't go to my website because it's under construction and has no information. LinkedIn would be the place to find me. And in my work, coaching and training and advisory work with Spring Training, I work with growth stage teams to help them be fundamentally more human in their selling, and also to create these really important containers where people can learn and bring themselves to their work.
Awesome. And we're evolving this show this year, and so we used to ask the question, how would you define sexy? But Susanna's introduced this new concept of saucy. So how would you define saucy? Did you say saucy, Susanna?
Saucy. Oh my God.
You guys say sassy, sassy. I say saucy.
Wait a second. Wait. So when you're saying saucy, you mean SASSY?
Well, yeah, sassy.
Oh my gosh, I thought you meant saucy as in the sauce.
Saucy is like sexy, and sass. I mean, sass is kind of sexy, right?
Yeah. Same thing. No, it's saucy is English for sassy.
I didn't know that.
You go.
Oh, you say saucy, I say sassy. You say tomato, I say tomato.
Yeah, I'm not going to sing it.
In a weird way, Gina, like I think it all comes back to this idea of play that we've been talking about, right? Like not taking yourself too seriously and just acknowledging that we are all like in process, in progress, showing up as best we can.
Perfect. And I love the way that's a really great circle back to the very beginning of the show when I said, tell us a little bit about you. And you're like, well, who I am right now at this moment. And, and I love that. And I think if everybody could stay in that mindset of who you are at this moment, which is always subject to change.
Amen to that.
Be open to that. It has been so fun, Jordana, having you on the show.
So fun to talk. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here with us. And thank you to our warners, also known as our listeners of the Women Your Mother Warns You About. For more information about our show, you could go to womenyourmotherwarnsyouabout.com. We are in the middle of a transition right now. So you can find enough information there. You can also, our website will be going through a reboot very soon. And go to salesgravy.university to find out what courses we've got coming up. We've got a lot of new courses coming up, including some that I've created. I'm going to give that little plug right there. And thanks to Sales Gravy and Jeb Blunt, and to my co-host of the moment, Susanna Gray Jones. And that's it. We're out of here. Bye. Bye, Warners.
Bye.
This really will get serious soon.
Yeah, it doesn't have to. I don't think anybody wants it to be serious.